Just like we can't choose our parents, we can't choose our neighbors. India lives in the world's most hostile neighborhood. There is no country in the world which doesn't have a direct Chinese presence. It's now grown to be the second largest economy in the world. It's $18 trillion. So they have a unique political system, which is still, they are communist, they're authoritarian, but they have capitalist views and capitalist values. I think it's going to go from bad to worse. I don't expect it to improve at all. The world realizes, West realizes, America realizes, and realized it like over a decade ago, that Asia is the power center.
Welcome to another episode. Today we have a very special guest with us, Ms. Gaurie Dwivedi, an economist by training and a journalist by profession. With over 16 years of experience, she has worked with various media houses such as the Sunday Guardian, Beyond, and Economic Times. Today's conversation is about her latest book, Blinkers Off, which talks about how to counter China's growth. Let's hear more on this from her. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Shivam. Thank you for having me.
Ma'am, to begin with, do you want to talk about how China's global influence came in the picture and what key factors that led to it?
So China has been on an expansionist mode in terms of increasing its presence for the last 2 decades. At least since 2002, 2003, it's been really in a mode to expand its presence across every part of the world. It started first with Europe, it extended to Africa, and now, of course, it's more in Latin America. It's led by business interests. It's largely been about how Chinese companies have expanded their operations in these parts of the world, whether it is the Asian countries, which is back home near ASEAN for China, or it is in Europe. And in fact, 2010 to 2016-17 was the golden period for the Chinese economy in terms of growing in every part of the world. 2016 was their highest year in terms of the kind of investments they made in any part of the world, whether it was by acquiring companies, whether by starting something afresh. 2016 was their golden year in terms of the biggest expansion in investments that they made. And it was across the board. It was also at a time when BRI was really in full swing, which meant more infrastructure projects as well. So China's story has been about the economic interests leading it to every part of the world. Over time, of course, it's now grown to be the second largest economy in the world. It's $18 trillion, which means that it has a finger in every pie. There is no country in the world which doesn't have a direct Chinese presence, and the Chinese economy, through its companies, have a direct presence in all these countries now.
So there was a time when India's GDP was higher than China. What has changed since, like you said, 2016? What has changed? One important thing that you said, that they have been doing a lot of foreign direct investments, and they've been inclusive for that. What other factors were involved in order to achieve that kind of success in terms of the global development?
So China has been a beneficiary of a very open door policy of America as well as European countries, where the entire focus was on getting cheap Chinese products,
right,
and bending on more rules, whether it was related to IPR, copyright, patents, etc., or whether it is even in terms of bending rules that they have, which are very stringent, related to child labor and other such factors. All of that was bent and disregarded to ensure that cheap Chinese products were able to come in. And this ensured that the overall Chinese economic machinery was able to grow at a very fast pace. Of course, the reforms that came in from 1979 onwards in China meant that it was able to create big export-oriented units. There were just 4 big SEZs that really started the China story. People think it was like lots and lots of SEZs. There were just 4 big SEZs. And then 2 later came in. So there were just 6 SEZs, which really changed the entire export story for China.
Yeah.
And these units got every possible industrial freedom that was available inside China to them. Add to it the fact that there was a very comfortable and a very progressive helping environment, business environment in both US and European countries that allowed China to grow so fast. And this story continued till about 2018, 2019, till of course the pandemic hit earlier in China, which was end of 2019 for them.
There was a switch from being communist country to now acting like a capitalist one. What is your take on that?
So they have a unique political system, which is still, they are communist, they're authoritarian, but they have capitalist views and capitalist values. So, and that has only increased with time. Now there is an entire generation of Chinese youngsters who don't have jobs right now. They are struggling to find jobs, but they've seen capitalist values with their parents' generation, the previous generation, where they saw that there was massive economic growth, double-digit growths that they saw for year on year, decades on decades, and they want to embrace and want that to continue. So those are pure capitalist values. The other side to it is, of course, that there are communist so-called ideals that the party wants to talk about, which is the Communist Party of China, and the authoritarian streak of its political leadership. So all these three come together to form a very unique and possibly a very dangerous political system that China has right now.
Can I request you to talk a little about your book as well and share with our audience what it is about, basically?
So the book talks about, it has three components and three parts to it, essentially. One talks about how China rose, and when it did, why is it that the world was sleeping? The first segment says while the world was sleeping, because it talks about how China was able to grow at such a fast pace when the world thought that it was largely an economic story and only an economic story.
Right.
But there were other factors as well. They wanted the economic story to come in first, and then their other factors, which was about how they wanted to take over the world with their values, their ideas, and their set thoughts. So that is the first part of it, where it talks about, how life changed after 1979 for them, what were the immediate set of changes that they saw. The second part of the book also then talks about the time the pandemic struck. That was a period where the world was able to see what really happened. And while we don't have an official report, and WHO did give a clean chit to China, there is a very large section of intellectuals around the world who feel that COVID was not just a natural disaster, it was possibly man-made, and China had a very large role in spreading it around the world. So, but when COVID struck and when the pandemic happened, it made people and made countries realize around the world that just how dependent that they've become on China for everything, even for their medical devices, medical equipment, masks. So even to survive in a situation which was possibly created by China, they needed China's help. So that was the extent of China's dependence. The third segment of the book talks about what is it that can be done to deleverage, de-link, de-risk from China, whether it is through economic aspects or other aspects. How can that happen? And the last segment then essentially also talks that when it happens, when there is de-risking that takes place from China, there'll be a backlash, there'll be a response, because that will have direct economic implications for China.
Right.
When the world starts de-risking and de-linking, Chinese economic interests will be impacted. So how will China respond? And which are the areas in which it could respond? Nobody wins a war. So war in a traditional style may not be the first resort for China. It could be the other aspects, whether it's information warfare, whether it's trade warfare, which we saw in Australia, how it overnight decided that it's not going to take Australian wine and barley and a couple of other things. It led to $3 billion of impact and immediate losses to Australia. So those are the kind of warfare domains that China may look to increasingly tap into to respond when the world wants to deleverage, de-risk from China. So that's the landscape, and that's the broad thought behind the book.
By understanding how China is growing, how do you think India could, learn from them and, improve our systems as well in terms of our growth?
I think there's been a huge learning curve that India has been able to get onto the last couple of years in terms of how much we are dependent on China, how much we need to ensure that we are insulated from some of the Chinese, issues and areas. And also it has forced many people, whether it is the private sector, whether it's policymakers, whether it's intellectuals, to understand what could be the next phase of growth for India, and how will that be? What will be the future economic trajectory of
Right.
India? And I think that clarity has emerged when you see India saying no to RCEP.
Mhm.
You see India saying that we want to forge more FTAs. There's one with Indonesia, there's one with South Korea. Of course, apart from the big ones that are being in the pipeline, which it's US or UK that have been in the pipeline for some time. These, I think, are direct results and derivatives of the thought process that is now there in policymakers' minds, which is that India's next economic trajectory will have to keep in mind that we need to have limited exposure to China. See, we can't eliminate, nobody can eliminate exposure
Right.
to China. It's the second largest economy in the world. But what can happen is reduce it and make sure that your economic interests are robust and they are not completely dependent on China. And I think that is what has been achieved so far. And I believe more will happen going forward.
I'll come back to China's growth on India's implication and how we should tackle. But before that, I want to understand from you, how is China involved in the Russia-Ukraine war that is ongoing, and what was their role in it?
So China is a very large player in the geopolitical sphere in any domain and in any part of the world. As I said at the beginning of this discussion, that China impacts every country in the world now. It has a finger in every pie. It most certainly has a very direct role in the Russia-Ukraine conflict that's now been 1.5 years, and it's still showing no signs of ending. So Russia's oil reserves, mineral reserves, mineral deposits are needed for China. China needs it to grow and to continue to grow. So that is a direct economic relationship they have. Second part is, these are 2 countries out of the 5 UN permanent members.
Right.
So if these 2 out of 5 countries stick together, they'll make sure that nothing can happen to either of them in the UN.
Right.
Whether it's censure, whether it's any movement, anything, nothing can really move in the UN if 2 out of the 5 P5 members, veto everything.
The veto, yeah.
Yeah, they exercise their veto. And the other aspect is that Mr. Putin's personality traits, his style of functioning, his political thought process is very similar to that of Mr. Xi Jinping. And the idea has been that if Mr. Putin loses, then it will also mean that any such experiment that Xi Jinping may want to do in the future would also lose. So to ensure that doesn't happen, both Russia and China have been together since the beginning of the conflict. Not even once China has openly condemned the entire conflict. They've also they've done back and forth on how much they want to mediate, but not really played the role of a mediator in its full spirit. And lastly, Mr. Xi Jinping also wants to use this as an opportunity to impress upon Putin that, I'm probably your only well-wisher in the world.
Right.
I'm sticking for you right now. You got to stick back when I need it. And I think that club is what both of them have really struck out for themselves. And that's been China's biggest impact, contribution, and role in the entire Ukraine conflict.
You just spoke about the geopolitics and how the world order is changing. Do you see the shift in power of the geopolitics from the West to the East?
I think that began about 10 years back during, in fact, Barack Obama's time, when he realized, whether it's a pivot or a shift or, he had his own words. The fact is, the world realizes, West realizes, America realizes, and realized it over a decade ago, that Asia is the power center of the present and most certainly the economic center of the future.
Right.
And India and China put together do contribute the largest economies in Asia and have a huge growth potential, disregarding the latest economic misfortunes that China is going through. And that can be a separate topic altogether. But from a larger understanding point of view, there is now greater realization that Asia is really the growth story of the world going forward. So that has most certainly happened. And more than China, it's India. And that reflects in the overall perception of India, whether it is in terms of geoeconomics, whether it's in terms of geopolitics. More and more countries are wanting to sign an FTA with India. The US-India FTA has been stuck for years.
Right.
But the sense one gets is that America wants to now move forward on it because they realize they must. Likewise, the UK-India FTA has been stuck for the longest. But there is an expectation that when Mr. Rishi Sunak comes to India this year, there will be positive movement and possibly even closing the FTA. So why are countries wanting to sign an FTA with India? It is the world's fastest growing economy. It is going to have the largest youth population going forward. It will grow much faster in the backdrop of a slowing Chinese economy. So in that sense, I believe there is now greater realization amongst most and all developed parts of the world that not only Asia, it is India that's really going to be at the center of it all.
So what does India need to do to be ready for these kind of investment and these kind of focus on from the rest of the world?
I think it needs to be very clear that what should be the kind of ease of doing business policies that it should continue to work on.
Right.
How is it that it can make sure that it has an enabling business environment? There has to be more focus on growth and not just on taxes. There has to be more focus on ensuring that when companies come to invest, they are given every possible, investor-friendly measure that other countries are.
Right.
See, let's not forget that India is also competing with a Vietnam. It's also competing with a Malaysia and an Indonesia in terms of increased investments. When companies are looking to de-risk from China, when companies are looking to go to any other Asian country to invest, they are looking at India, but they're looking at other alternatives as well. Just like any shopper who goes to a supermarket,
Right.
who wants to get the best deal possible. So India needs to ensure that it grabs this opportunity with both hands. I feel more can be done. Effort has been made, but I do feel personally more can be done. Like, why
Right.
is Indonesia becoming the EV hub of the world? It should be India.
Right.
So how do we get on to such big opportunities? I think is really going to be deciding how we make the best of this big chance.
In terms of India-China relation, it's been a rocky path for us. There's been border disputes, there's been trade disputes, been financial disputes. How do you see India-China relations changing in the coming years? Because we're realizing how powerful China is becoming, and we need to, take the most out of it. So how do you see that relationship changing now?
I think it's going to go from bad to worse. I don't expect it to improve at all. And I'll tell you 3 reasons for that. One is that the Chinese economy is slowing. So when it's slowing, it's going through a domestic crisis of its own, and it will have to deflect attention of its voters, of its people. And that will happen by putting together a very aggressive stance at the border. And that will mean that China will probably become more belligerent than what it is already. So that will mean that relations will nosedive. Second reason why I feel that India-China relations will, if not deteriorate, will most certainly not become better. And that is because of Pakistan. So Pakistan is going through its own internal mess right now.
Right.
Its economy is on the verge of a complete collapse. The nation is on the verge of a complete collapse. Now, what happens in such a scenario? China uses elements within Pakistan to disrupt India more.
Right.
Which will again mean that the India-China relations will probably become from bad to worse. Thirdly, and equally important, is Mr. Xi Jinping's own expectation of a legacy. See, Mao ensured that Tibet came to China. Deng Xiaoping ensured that China grew.
Yeah.
Jiang Zemin ensured that Hong Kong came to China. What is it that Xi Jinping is ensuring? A falling economy? A breaking Chinese economic miracle? He would like his legacy to be more than that. And that will mean some sort of a decision impact on the India-China equation in terms of more aggression. What shape it will take is something that, as I said, I wish I could predict the future. But that's my estimate, that India-China relations are unlikely to get better than what they are right now. Whether they will deteriorate, time will tell, but these factors is what I feel are the reasons. sense.
How can we as a nation prepare for something like that, wherein a strong nation, which is a neighbor, is going to be affecting our geopolitical stand and how we look at the world order?
Just like we can't choose our parents, we can't choose our neighbors. India lives in the world's most hostile neighborhood. I don't think there's any other country which has a more hostile neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
We have Pakistan on one side, we have China on the other side. Now we also have China-supported insurgents in Myanmar and China's massive influence in Sri Lanka.
Right.
So it is a very hostile neighborhood that we live in. We need to be very, very clear about our economic interests, strengthen them. If you become a $10 trillion economy, you become a $15 trillion economy, you automatically become much bigger in your might. Second is ensure that your military strengths become deeper and better than what they are. See, military strengths are always a work in progress. There is always new technology that's coming in. There's always something good to continue to build on.
Right.
But I think we need to be more clear on being fast or fast tracking those decisions to move ahead on those lines.
So since we talk about the change in technology and there's a lot of advancement happening in and around us, I want to talk about AI as well and how India could use AI, whatever the growth of China has been through AI. Would you want to shed some light on it?
So AI is an evolving technology. What I can say is that AI or any future technology will have impacts on military as well as economic domains. Whether it is in the field of biotechnology or whether it's in the field of any forward-looking such sectors, the semiconductors, all those areas that we talk about, they are going to be directly impacted by technological progress.
Right.
And the future of economy and future of manufacturing is going to be technology driven. India needs to ensure that it gets on that ladder. So we need to move on that economic ladder. We started at the bottom, we've moved a little, but we need to move higher up in our value chain as to, whether we can have AI, robotics, machine learning, blockchain, all those technologies in our manufacturing capabilities and grow that. That's one area that, we need to focus on. And second is that all these technologies have dual usage. They have military applications as well. And technology is really going to decide future warfare.
Right.
How do we get onto that is something that the government or other people, experts really need to put their minds on. I think Industry 4.0 is here.
Right.
And that will impact both private sector as well as military applications. How soon we get onto it is really going to be very important for us.
For our audience, would you like to share some wisdom from the book that you've written and that would encourage them to read the book as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So the book is written in a manner that ensures that those who are interested about China are able to learn more about it. It is jargon free. It is written in a style that allows more and more readers to understand. Because I feel that, Shivam, China is an area that every Indian needs to know more about. Chinese threat, Chinese impact, Chinese influence, and what China thinks is something that Indians still don't know much about. We need to encourage that. And I think this book is a step in that direction, encouraging every Indian to pick up this piece of literature, which is not very dense, not very heavy on jargon, but explains the situations the way it is. So I think that is what this book is all about. And I hope through this discussion as well, more and more of your viewers are encouraged to pick up a copy, which is available on Amazon.
Thank you so much, ma'am. This was an enlightening conversation with you. I'm sure the audience got a lot of insights on China relations with India. Can I request you to sign a copy for me?
Of course.
And that's the one that I would keep dear to me myself as well.
Thank you so much, Shivam. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to like, share, and subscribe.